Some people misunderstand you without ever asking who you are. They label your silence before listening to your reasons. They assume distance means coldness, not protection. They mistake restraint for weakness or worse, arrogance. And eventually that misunderstanding starts to hurt deeply. You replay conversations long after they end. You wonder which word caused the shift in their expression. You question whether clarity would have changed the outcome. You feel unseen despite explaining yourself many times. That pain feels personal, even when it shouldn't. Being misunderstood triggers something ancient inside us. It touches the fear of being socially rejected. It activates the need to belong and be accepted. Your nervous system reads misunderstanding as danger. Not physical danger, but emotional isolation. So you start adjusting yourself unconsciously. You explain more than necessary. You soften your boundaries to appear agreeable. You laugh when something actually hurts. You shrink pieces of yourself for comfort. At first, this feels like maturity. It feels like choosing peace over conflict. But over time, it becomes emotional self-erasure. You stop recognizing your own reactions. You lose trust in your internal signals. Misunderstanding becomes exhausting, not just painful. You prepare defenses before conversations even begin. You anticipate judgment before words are spoken. Your mind stays alert, never resting fully. That constant vigilance slowly drains you. You start believing clarity equals safety. So you keep explaining yourself endlessly. You think understanding will finally bring relief. But clarity doesn't always bring connection. Sometimes it only brings more distortion. Because some people don't misunderstand accidentally. They misunderstand through their own emotional filters. They hear through insecurity, fear, or projection. Your truth passes through their unresolved experiences. It comes out changed, distorted, incomplete. This is where the shift begins. Not with anger, not with withdrawal, but with quiet realization. You realize understanding is not always mutual. You see that effort doesn't guarantee accuracy. You notice how some people prefer their assumptions. You stop chasing interpretations you can't control. That realization feels unsettling at first. Then, something surprising happens. The pain begins to loosen its grip, not because they changed, but because you did. You recognize misunderstanding as information. It shows you where emotional alignment ends. It reveals who listens beyond their own narratives. It clarifies where depth is welcome or resisted. That knowledge is grounding. You begin separating identity from perception. You stop letting reactions define your worth. You observe responses instead of absorbing them. Your nervous system slowly calms. The urgency to explain fades. This is not emotional numbness. This is emotional regulation. This is the beginning of strength, and it changes everything moving forward. The psychology behind letting go of misunderstanding. Once the pain softens, awareness starts replacing reaction. You begin noticing patterns instead of isolated moments. You see how misunderstanding follows certain personality traits. Quiet people experience it more frequently. Independent thinkers face it almost constantly. Psychologically, misunderstanding is rarely about facts. It is usually about emotional positioning. People listen from their own inner state.
They hear through personal fears and expectations. Your words are filtered before being understood. Some people feel threatened by emotional neutrality. They depend on visible reactions to feel secure. Silence disrupts their ability to read control. Calmness challenges their emotional framework, so they fill gaps with assumptions. Others interpret boundaries as rejection. They confuse self-respect with emotional distance. Your limits expose their lack of internal stability. Instead of reflecting, they assign meaning externally. Misunderstanding becomes a defense mechanism. This is why explaining rarely solves everything. Explanation assumes shared emotional language, but emotional languages differ deeply between people. Not everyone values introspection or restraint. Some value dominance, validation, or emotional control. When you understand this, something changes internally. You stop personalizing distorted interpretations. You no longer argue with someone's emotional lens. You realize correction isn't always connection. That realization brings relief. Your nervous system learns a new response. Instead of tension, it chooses neutrality. Instead of urgency, it chooses observation. You feel less pressure to perform clarity. You allow silence to exist without defense. This doesn't mean disengagement from humanity. It means selective emotional investment. You choose depth where curiosity exists. You conserve energy where assumptions dominate. That choice restores internal balance. Psychologically, this is boundary maturity. You stop chasing validation through understanding. You stop measuring worth through perception. You ground identity internally, not socially. That grounding creates emotional stability. Misunderstanding loses its emotional charge here. It becomes background noise, not a threat. You still notice it, but it doesn't wound. Your body doesn't tense the same way. Your mind doesn't replay conversations endlessly. You also notice increased clarity within yourself. Your decisions feel cleaner and less reactive. Your communication becomes simpler, not louder. You say less, but mean more. That precision attracts the right listeners. This stage feels quiet but powerful. There is no dramatic confrontation, no announcement of emotional independence, just internal recalibration. A steady return to self-trust. You begin respecting your own perception again. You stop outsourcing self-definition to others. You reclaim authorship of your identity, and misunderstanding no longer threatens that. Because now, your sense of self is stable. When misunderstanding becomes quiet, strength. At this stage, something fundamental has shifted inside you. You no longer react to being misunderstood instinctively. You pause instead of defending your character. You listen without trying to correct perception. That pause is not weakness. It is emotional sovereignty. You understand something most people never do. Not everyone deserves access to your inner clarity. Not every assumption requires correction. Some misunderstandings protect your energy. They quietly filter incompatible connections. You stop over-explaining your intentions. You stop proving your emotional depth. You stop shrinking to appear approachable. You allow others to meet you where they are, or not meet you at all. This creates a calm internal confidence. Not loud, not performative, just stable. People notice the difference without explanation. Your presence feels grounded and unreactive. You no longer chase emotional alignment. You allow alignment to reveal itself naturally. That patience feels powerful. Misunderstanding no longer defines the interaction. It simply marks emotional distance. And distance is not rejection. It is information. Useful, neutral information. You also stop romanticizing being understood. You accept that deep understanding is rare, and that rarity makes it valuable. You stop expecting everyone to see you fully. That expectation was never realistic. Instead, you focus on internal coherence. Your actions align with your values. Your silence aligns with your boundaries. Your words align with intention. That alignment creates peace. There is no bitterness here, no superiority, no emotional withdrawal, just clarity. You still care, but you care without attachment. You engage without self-abandonment. You speak without overexposure. That balance is emotional maturity. When misunderstanding happens now, it lands differently.
It passes through instead of lodging inside. It doesn't linger in your thoughts. It doesn't demand explanation. It doesn't hurt. Because your identity no longer depends on interpretation. You know who you are without witnesses. You trust your internal experience fully. And that trust is unshakable. This is when being misunderstood truly stops hurting. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You stopped negotiating your self-worth. You stopped translating your soul endlessly. You stopped seeking safety through clarity. You found safety through self-trust. And from here forward, misunderstanding loses its power. It cannot destabilize what is already grounded. It cannot wound what no longer needs approval. It simply fades into irrelevance, quietly, naturally, completely.